You can get up in the morning and decide exactly what you want to do because you have the money to do it. That's freedom. You cannot be really free if you're a slave to your job, to your circumstances, or to your overhead. And so I think it's laudable that you're even here to think about, how do I get ahead? Not so you can own a Lamborghini and live in Isleworth, although that's something that might be open to you at some point, but because you just like to have the freedom to live your life the way you'd like to. And that's what the Oxford Club does. Now, I say I'm a financial writer, but it's funny, when I went to school, I actually aced all my writing classes. I was terrible at math. I took an aptitude test for mechanical aptitude. They said I was mildly retarded, and the only thing that I was remotely good at was writing. But I'll never forget, I was having an exit interview with a career counselor at Furman University where I went to school. And she said, well, what do you think you want to do? And I said, well, really, the only thing I'm really good at is writing. I think I'd like to be a writer. And she practically laughed in my face and said, you know, no one makes a living as a writer except for the people at the very top of the bestseller list. And you've got a better chance of playing third base for the Yankees than you do of making a living as a writer. And I'd always heard the stories about people who wrote and they submitted their stuff and they got rejected and rejected and rejected and they never made any money. And actually, that is the likelihood for most people who want to write. So I decided that I needed to do something else. And she goes, well, look, you score very high in verbal aptitude. Maybe you should go into sales. So I said, well, I don't really want to go into sales, but you know, if I can't write, then maybe that's what I should do. So now at the time, I was going to school, and one of the things I hated was being broke. You know, which, like most college students, I was all the time. And I had a little Triumph TR6, which was nice. It was a convertible. You know, girls would say, hey, will you take me for a ride in your convertible, blah, blah, blah. But it broke down all the time. It was always breaking down, and I couldn't afford to get it fixed. And my dad said, I'm not giving you more money to fix your TR6. And so I eventually had to trade it in for a used red Volkswagen Dasher. And for some reason, the girls never said, will you take me for a ride in your red Volkswagen Dasher? Never. So anyway, I decided I had to get a job in school. And my friends were all doing, you know, disgusting jobs, working the fryer at Wendy's or whatever, and they weren't making any money, and they were missing all the fun and whatever. And I had a friend of mine who said, look, you need to come work with me. I work at the nicest steakhouse in town, and you know, the prices are so high that when you get 15 or 20% of the tip, that you know that you make a good living doing this, and it's laid back. People come into a steakhouse, they're not in a hurry. You got a busboy who busses the table, and a cocktail waitress who serves the drinks, and a cashier makes the change, and hostess that seats the people, and you just basically show up and make sure everybody's happy and bring out their main course, and that's great. So that was the first thing, one of the first lessons I learned was if you go someplace where there's a lot of money involved, you're going to make more money. So my nephew's here selling real estate. You sell big ticket items, you tend to make, you know, a good living. You know, small ticket, if you're selling copiers to businesses, it can be a lot tougher to make a living. So that was one of the first lessons I learned. But I was in school, I was doing these jobs, and when I finished college, I'd actually interviewed with a few companies that came in. There were insurance companies and banks, and I was glad I interviewed with them because we had a perfect meeting of the minds. They didn't want me to work for them, and I didn't want to work for them. So I didn't know what I was going to do, so I packed up all my possessions in the back of my Dasher, which tells you how much stuff I had, and I moved to Florida because I figured on spring break I came to Florida. There were all my friends, and my family would vacation in Florida, so if you could live anywhere, why wouldn't you come to Florida? So I just drove down here, and the only contact I had was a guy who was a manager of the Bennigan's in Daytona Beach. And he said he would hire me as a waiter because I had waiting experience. This guy's name was Boogie, by the way. You can imagine what's like working at Bennigan's for Boogie. But Boogie put me on, but it was the exact opposite of working at a steakhouse. The Bennigan's, first of all, Bennigan's, I don't know if you know this or not, some of you may be excited to find this out, it's happy hour the entire day except for 7 to 9 in the evening. So I worked in this restaurant, and basically every drunk in Daytona Beach comes piling in there for the 2-to-1 giant drinks that we had. And you know, they were abusive, and the tabs were small, and the money was terrible. And you know, I was going out and having fun on the beach all day and waiting tables at night. And my poor parents, who had just paid for 4 years of the top private school in South Carolina, what's your son doing now? He's waiting tables at Bennigan's. You know, but that's what I was doing, and I felt terrible about it. You know, I did it for a few months. It was kind of fun. And then I realized that there was these guys coming in, and they're about my age, and they're dressed in nice clothes, and they're driving BMWs and nice cars, and they're throwing a lot of money around. I said, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing for a living? Well, this is 1980, by the way. I'm going to date myself. This is 1980. And they said, well, we're selling timeshares down on the beach. Now, these guys say timeshares, everybody nods their head. Back in 1980, nobody knew what a timeshare was. You know, it was a what? Yeah, come on down. We'll, you know, if you're interested, we'll get you a job selling timeshares. So I go down to this place called Sandy Shores, and I walk in there, and they were looking for people, but you had to get a real estate license. So I went and got my real estate license, and I came back, and they put me into training. I mean, they called it training, that no one really trained you. You just kind of hung around and listened to people for a while to work at Sandy Shores. Well, I followed people around, and I listened, and I took notes or whatever, and then after about 3 weeks, this guy calls me into the back office, and he says, you know, we've been thinking about the fact that we hired you, and you know, you don't have any sales experience, and you're young, and you look young, so you know, we're thinking that maybe that you know, you shouldn't get started here at all. And I got mad because I've been around for three weeks, and the guy's basically firing me without ever taking a prospect around. And I said, hey, you knew I had no sales experience when you hired me, and you knew I was young when you hired me. You know, what are you telling me that you're thinking about whether I'm not going to work out? He goes, all right, you start tomorrow. I mean, I don't know whether he was trying to put me through something to make me jump the hurdle or whatever. So I started the next day, and I'd never had sales experience before, and at the end of a month, I'd sold a couple of timeshares, but this is the most mortifying moment of my young sales career. They published at the end of the month the sales rankings for everybody at the resort, and there, number 27 out of 27 guys was my name. I was the worst salesman in the entire place. And I could have just crawled, you know, crawled away in a hole and died somewhere. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst salesman in the entire place. I couldn't believe it. So what I started doing was I looked at the names of the guys who were at the top of the list, and I looked back at the previous months before I came on board, and I saw that the guys at the top were the same guys at the top month after month after month. And so what I did is I started talking to these guys, and I found out that what they were doing, what they were saying, and how they were handling their prospects was totally, completely different than what everybody else was doing. And one of the points I want to make right here is if there's anything, any field you're thinking about getting into, go talk to the best people in the field. Not somebody you know, not somebody who's done okay, not somebody who's thinking about getting out of it, but the very best people, because they, first of all, they love to tell you how much they know. I mean, these people just couldn't wait to get it off their chest, all the great things they were doing. And by listing those people, I eventually moved on up till I was at the very top of the thing. And after a few months, I was the top guy at the entire resort. And I have to say, if those of you haven't sold timeshares, it is one of the toughest sales jobs in the world. Because, like, for instance, I used to live next door to a guy who sold Mercedes. And he goes, hey, oh, you think selling timeshares is tough? You know, how many people can afford a Mercedes, blah, blah, blah. I said, listen, you have no idea what you're talking about. If someone walks into a Mercedes dealership, they're at least thinking they'd like to own a Mercedes. When a guy comes into a timeshare resort, he's been offered some kind of a gift, 2 tickets to Disney or whatever. You've got 90 minutes to take a couple that have made a solemn pact that they're not going to buy anything and turn them around. You know, a total intangible. Like, you know, they walk out of there and what have we done? They've got this big sheaf of legal documents and they're out $12,000 or whatever. So I mean, but if you can sell timeshares, you can sell anything, because I mean, and some of the very best people there, you know, they'd been in land sales, and one guy had sold burial plots, and he was one of the best salesmen in the places. And he said the only thing that's bad is that when he'd go out and he'd run to women at night, and they say, "What do you do?" And he'd go, this is when he was selling burial plots, and he goes, "Well, I'm in real estate." And they'd say, "Well, what kind of real estate?" He'd said, "Subterranean." So then when I ran to women in bars, they said, "What do you do? What kind of real estate do you sell?" "Temporal." It's timeshare. Temporal real estate. Oh yeah, it's really moving. So anyway, well, so the thing was, I got good at this, and this is back in 1981, 82, 83. And I started making a 6-figure income. And making $100,000 or more in 1982 was like making $250,000. I mean, that was like a lot of money for a young single guy. The only problem was, after about 5 years of doing it, I was just burned out, because you have all these people coming through and just collecting their gifts and have shopped every timeshare resort and whatever. I felt like I was banging my head against the wall. But the thing was, I couldn't bring myself to leave the money. I thought the money was so good. I'd bought a home. And incidentally, what I did was